you, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Close to that mic.
Just kidding. These things are always a little low for me. All right. So thank you for having me here. I just want to say I was pleased to see that your chapter had changed your name to Bird Alliance. I think language is important, names are important, and I think having a welcoming birding community is important. So I was pleased to see that. So I'll start by just confessing up front, I'm not a professional wildlife biologist. I'm an amateur naturalist. I'm a wildlife enthusiast, but I have been working for the last quarter century plus in the Bay Area, working on biodiversity campaigns and protection of some of the most iconic species that we have in the region here, things like tule elk and burrowing owls, Alameda whipsnakes, green sturgeon, foothill yellow-legged frogs, golden eagles, and a lot more. And then I spent about 50 years exploring the Bay Area when I was younger and skinnier and in better shape as a runner and a hiker, and then as a bicyclist, and then through kayaking around, and then when I became a birder, through doing what birders do, which is bushwhacking and going to the sewage treatment ponds and these sketchy locations on the other side of the railroad track. So. Fell in love with the Bay Area at an early age, and wanted to write pretty much a love letter to the Bay Area. So we're in kind of an unprecedented time here when all of our conservation laws are under attack. The very idea of advocacy and protest itself is under attack, and just say, be grateful that you live in California, and this is a very important time, not just to try to protect our federal laws, but also be really engaged on the state and local level. I hope everyone's taking care of themselves and each other and those people who are most vulnerable in our communities. And all right, enough depressing stuff. Let's talk about what you came here for, which is stories of animal salacious behavior, such as coprophagy, if anyone knows what that is. We'll talk about that later. So. All right, so what is this book? So this is a watchable wildlife guide for the greater San Francisco Bay Area. It covers the 9 counties ringing San Francisco Bay. I delve a little bit out into the Delta and a little bit down the coast to Monterey Bay. Everything that's within easy striking distance. It's got 55 chapters that cover more than 100 species, from marine mammals to creatures that are feathery or scaly or slithery, and I even have a few invertebrates thrown in because it can't all be charismatic megafauna. So this is a practical guidebook that will tell you where, when, and what to look for in finding kind of the most charismatic species in the Bay Area. I tried to pick creatures that are either endemic, meaning they occur only here in the region or in California, kind of iconic, or that have dramatic or stunning congregations or behaviors. So, and these are kind of animal ambassadors that I hope will introduce readers to the region and hopefully inspire them to protect Bay Area nature and get involved in Bay Area conservation. And I wrote it as if, I tried to write it as if we were sitting around a campfire and I was trying to convince you really need to go see this animal species or this unusual congregation for example, now that we're in summer, if you haven't been to the Yolo Bypass between Davis and Sacramento, you're going to want to go out there this summer to witness 250,000 Mexican free-tailed bats streaming out from underneath the causeway at dusk. It's the most spectacular bat congregation in the Central California area. And if you're around in the fall, if you haven't already seen it, you're going to want to go to San Rafael and sit in a lawn chair with a little beverage and watch the Voxus swifts gather and form into a literal cyclone of swifts, and up to 30,000 of them pour themselves down a chimney to roost for the night. So what inspired me to write this book? I pretty much spent my entire life falling in love with the nature of the Bay Area, and I spent most of my adult life fighting to protect it. So the book's illustrator is eco-philosopher Obi Kaufman, who has noted that people protect what they love, and they love what they know. So this is really, I'm hoping that people come away with this book with direct experiences about these animals and want to go see them. So. All right, so why irreverent? I'm a pretty irreverent guy, so I wanted it to be fun, but a lot of conservation is advanced through just kind of mind-numbing legal filings and really dry, scholarly papers that are peer-reviewed and appear in journals, and the general public is never going to read those things. So, and people really respond to stories and storytelling. So I wanted to, basically have something that's not your typical dry and nature tome. So, and I think the best review I got of the book was from my mom, who, when I tried to explain to her what I was writing, she thought for a minute and said, "Oh, so you've written the Blazing Saddles of wildlife guides." So I can tell the age of this crowd because you knew that reference. And actually, there is a lot of reverence in the book, reverence for the critters I cover, and also, the Bay Area and the places. So I do believe I have a nature-based spirituality personally, and I want people to really connect with these animals as kin and find their kinship with these animals. So if you'll indulge me, I will read a little bit from the book, one of my favorite animals, the loggerhead shrike. Yeah, do we have a light? Yeah, let's get a light. Yeah, let's turn these on. Actually, that would help. Yeah, okay. All right, loggerhead shrike, the butcher bird. Behold the butcher bird, a compact black mass killer that only weighs as much as 2 AA batteries and belies its small stature with an outsized murderous habit of impaling its prey on spikes. Its predatory nature is unusual for a songbird, earning the loggerhead shrike the title of honorary raptor. Where shrikes hunt the grasslands, small animals end their lives skewered on thorns or barbed wire fences. Their barbarous behavior is aided by a sharply hooked bill with cutting edges and notches called tomial teeth, but birds don't have teeth, remember? Used for severing the spinal cords of their victims with a precision bite to the nape. Because they lack large talons for grasping or tearing, shrikes resort to impaling insects, lizards, small mammals, or tiny birds for easy dining or to save for later. Thus the nicknames butcher bird or thorn bird. Caches of speared food come in handy for shrikes during breeding season when they need extra energy or in winter when prey is scarce. An industrious shrike can turn a barbed wire fence into a gruesome art installation. I call this one Still Life with Lizard, and my latest work over there is Mouse Decomposing. So that's... So I strongly encourage you to visit the website Death on the Plains. It's a photo documentation, thousands of photos of shrike prey items from beetles to snakes and lizards impaled on barbed wire fences in Colorado. Some amazing photography. So. All right, the Bay Area hosts some pretty amazing wildlife during the summer. So if you want some ideas for what's on tap now in the Bay Area, let's start with badgers. And if you want to see a badger, you've got to get out into our grasslands. These are one of our more elusive mammals. This is the American badger. And what exactly is a badger? Well, start with a skunk. Add some wicked claws, juice it up on steroids, and hybridize it with a tank, and that's a pretty good approximation of a badger. So they're officially the fastest digging animal on planet Earth. They are denizens of open grasslands with sandy soils, and they use their powerful bodies, those shovel-like paws, and those huge strong claws to unearth and ambush ground squirrels and gophers. So badgers are a keystone species for the health of our grassland ecosystems. Their digging activity actually helps a lot of other species, not just helps with soil development, but what they unearth actually shelters, and their abandoned burrows shelters other species such as foxes, skunks, burrowing owls, and endangered local species such as the California tiger salamander and the California red-legged frog use their burrows. Far from being a bother, badgers are actually pretty helpful. They help control rodent populations, they kill venomous snakes, they eat insects, and they clean up a lot of our carrion that would be sitting around. And they're, of course, declining in the Bay Area as they are throughout California. They're officially listed as a state species of concern. The problem is, they require pretty large areas of grassland, which is eliminated when we build our houses and malls and farms and roads. So, and then the use of rodent poisons is a double whammy for these guys because it not only kills their prey, but then when they eat, they get secondary poisoning when they eat poisoned rodents. So a lot of people have no idea that badgers actually live in the Bay Area, which is a win for the badgers because they just want to be left alone to, waddle around and sleep in their burrow and do some recreational rototilling. So, if you go searching for badgers, you got to temper your expectations a little because you're more likely to see their diggings than the actual creature. But they are findable. They're more visible spring through summer, and unfortunately, they're most detectable in the summer when young are dispersing and are often found as roadkill. So, if you really want to find a badger, your best opportunity is at Point Reyes National Seashore. If you want to up your odds, you can book a trip with Point Reyes Safaris. A friend of mine who has been leading trips out there to find not just badgers, but can definitely find you bobcats, coyotes, foxes, and possibly something like a mountain lion or a long-tailed weasel out there as well as birds. Locally, if you want to go looking locally for badgers, they had disappeared from Mount Diablo by the 1970s before the state park was created, and this was likely due to poisoning of ground squirrels by ranchers, but they've been making a bit of a comeback on the mountain. Let's see, I think since since 2020, there have been annual sightings. So places to look locally for badgers: Lime Ridge Open Space, Diablo Foothills, Round Valley Regional Preserve, and of course there's Badger Pass Trail at Los Vaqueros Reservoir, which I suspect might have had or have badgers. So. Oh boy, did I turn this whole thing off? No. Okay. Another summertime adventure is an adrenaline rush. This is our only venomous snake in the Bay Area, the northern Pacific rattlesnake. And despite their fearsome reputation, most snakes are not aggressive towards humans and will not strike or bite you unless they're provoked or they perceive danger. Most of them that you encounter are kind of harmlessly sunning themselves along the road, and if you just treat it like a nope rope and walk away, it will leave you alone. So most bites on humans, if you're going to get bit by a snake, are dry, actually. It costs a lot of energy for a snake to produce venom, and they need to use it for their prey. So most bites are dry with no venom injected. And this may not be surprising to you, but those who are statistically most likely to be bit are young drunk dudes. Yeah. And I hear having a mullet actually ups your odds a little. So, so to provide some perspective, you are 73 times more likely to be killed by a deer in the U.S. than you are by a venomous snake of any kind, and that's by hitting it in your car. And those statistics include people who regularly gamble with tissue necrosis by keeping venomous snakes in captivity. So, pretty low possibility. So rattlesnakes, of course, and other vipers are equipped with an impressive array of sensory and chemical tools to which to detect and subdue their prey, which are mostly ground squirrels and other rodents, rabbits, and birds. They have heat sensors in the pits between their eyes and nostrils. They have chemoreceptors to smell prey, which are activated when they flick their tongue. They have enhanced sensitivity to movement and vibrations, which they actually detect through their jawbone. And then those bulging venom glands that give them that triangular head shape, distinctive shape. So when it's time to kill, they deploy hinged hollow fangs that unfold and lock into place. And they deliver a very measured dose of venom that contains hemotoxins and neurotoxins. And the envenomation not only kills the prey, but it keeps it from fleeing, and it actually starts digesting it before the snake even swallows it. All right, let's dispel a few myths about rattlesnakes. They cannot jump or leap. They strike by lunging 1/3 to 1/2 of their body length, and that's with or without coiling. And another myth, adult western rattlesnakes generally grow 2 to 3 feet long, sometimes 4 feet. So your friend who told you they saw a 6-foot rattlesnake was likely hyperbolic or a little adrenaline impaired. So. And then the last myth, you cannot necessarily age a rattler by the number of rattles on its tail. They add a new rattle each time they shed their skin, which can be more than once a year. So. All right, now's where it gets fun. Let's get into the salacious details of serpent reproduction, which involves intertwining, aligning cloacal openings, wraparound pulsing, and paired external genitals. Paired as in two per snake. So each snake has 2 sets of genitalia. They only use one at a time during mating, but it's always nice to have a backup. So biologists have long known that snakes have 2 penises, which are called hemipenes. Research on male reproductive anatomy dates back to 1674. But it wasn't until 2022 that research was published revealing that female snakes indeed have clitorises. Yes, 2 per female. So this finding implies that snake sex involves seduction and gratification, which is interesting. And unsurprisingly, it was female herpetologists who discovered that lady snakes have pleasure centers. Since male researchers have been unable to find the clitoris for, let me check the math. 348 years. So that tracks. So obviously, you guys live in one of the best areas in the Bay, in the best place in the Bay Area to see a rattlesnake, or rattlesnakes. Obviously, Mount Diablo State Park has all that kind of brushy habitat and rocky outcroppings that these snakes love. Other good local places: Los Vaqueros Reservoir, Briones, Lime Ridge again, Shell Ridge Open Space, Diablo Foothills, Black Diamond Mines, and Morgan Territory. So you guys are in some great snake habitat here. All right, I mentioned bats. Just a 1-hour drive from here is the Yolo Causeway. So this is the elevated Highway 80 freeway that goes over the seasonally flooded Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area when you're on your way from Davis to Sacramento. And this is where hundreds of thousands of bats lodge themselves in the bridge's expansion joints. That's them in the lower right there, directly under the commute traffic, and that's their daytime roost. So let me read you a couple paragraphs from my bat chapter, and if this doesn't get you out to Yolo Bypass, nothing will. So, all right, bats. Cheers, skull, salute, chin chin. Let's take a moment and raise a toast to bats, the planet's only flying mammals. Obviously, we celebrate bats for their ability to hoover up prodigious numbers of mosquitoes every evening. We should also be grateful for the decimation of beetles and moths, with bats providing U.S. farmers an estimated $23 billion annually in free pest control and reducing the need for pesticides. So pull up a lawn chair and pour yourself a beverage while watching the massive sunset bat fly out at Yolo Causeway near Davis. That's where up to 250,000 Mexican free-tailed bats congregate during summer months, roosting and hanging out upside down with their friends during the day beneath the 3-mile-long bridge. At dusk, the bats awaken to stage a mass exodus. They stream out from under the causeway in seemingly endless ribbons, disgorging into the twilight to join the evening mosquito hunt. Thank you, bats. Your drink of choice while toasting the bats should be a fermented cactus beverage, so that you can ponder the magical relationship between agaves, long-nosed bats, Homo sapiens, and yeast. Because arguably the most valuable service bats have gifted to humankind is pollination of the agave plants that are used to produce tequila. I mean, undebatable, right? Margarita drinkers throughout the world should pay homage to Mexico's lesser long-nosed bats. Though they don't occur in the Bay Area, these bats fertilize the agaves harvested for tequila and mezcal. This bat species was formerly imperiled because of habitat loss, but recovered enough to be taken off the endangered species list in 2018. However, a boom in mezcal consumption has led to overharvesting of agaves before they can produce the nectar the tequila bats rely on. Do your part by purchasing bat-friendly mezcal, which is harvested sustainably and leaves flowering agaves behind for the hardworking bats. Just look for the bat symbol.
But these are Mexican bats?
These are called Mexican freetail. They're California bats. The ones that are under, are called Mexican freetail.
Austin?
Yeah, are they the same species?
Come out at night.
You've got the big one there, yeah. So the Yolo Basin Foundation offers summertime bat events from late June through September when the masses of the bats are present. Another great bat spot nearby, a lot of you probably know this, Black Diamond Mines Regional Preserve in Antioch, and they roost in an old mine there. And in July and August, East Bay Regional Park District holds Bat Watch Wednesdays at Black Diamond Mines, so you can go for evening monitoring of the pallid bats and canyon bats that are in that old mine site. All right, summer is a great time for eelgrass adventures. I will read a little bit from my chapter on leopard sharks and bat rays. A simple Bay Area kayaking paddle can transform into a magical aquatic excursion once you encounter the creatures dwelling in estuarine eelgrass realms. Eelgrass is a marine seagrass that can grow into dense underwater meadows within shallow bays and estuaries, providing nursery habitat, food, and shelter for all kinds of marine life. Kayaking over eelgrass beds will give you glimpses into this underwater world and can bring communion with two enthralling eelgrass denizens, leopard sharks and bat rays. Drift quietly in your boat as squadrons of sleek, 3-foot-long sharks with distinctive leopard patterned black spots and bars glide and fin under you like streamlined torpedoes. Watch graceful rays flying past underwater, gently flapping their pectoral fins like birds. Enjoy their effortless grace and power as they cruise through their watery and muddy world below. Sharks and rays are both cartilaginous fish that navigate using specialized bioelectrical sensors more than sight. Both species have their mouths on their undersides and depend on their electrosensory system to locate prey, swimming along the bottom of estuaries and bays, scouring the mud and sand for shellfish, worms, fish eggs, crab, shrimp, octopi, and small fish to hoover up. Leopard sharks and bat rays coexist and are often seen together, swimming through the safety of eelgrass forests and congregating in shallow waters of Bay Area tidal marshes during spring to give birth to live young and during summer to mate. Bat rays are so cool that they copulate while swimming along, the male underneath the female with synchronized wing beats. Both species are ovoviviparous. That's a hard word. Ovoviviparous, meaning the female produces eggs, but instead of laying them, they develop and hatch within the mother's body. The following spring, female rays and sharks give birth to live young, usually from 7 to 36 pups for leopard sharks and between 2 and 10 pups for bat rays. Bat ray pups are born tail first, with their wings wrapped around them like a burrito and their stinger encased in a protective sheath. Shark and ray pups eventually move from sloughs into the open water of the bay, where they are vulnerable to predation by seven-gill sharks, larger fish, seals, and sea lions. And those photos are from a research project in the South Bay that tracks all kinds of fish, but catches a lot of bat rays and leopard sharks. And your best place to see these creatures, Drake's Estero in Point Reyes National Seashore. If you kayak into Home Bay, right about now, actually, you have a good chance of seeing both of these. If you go a little further afield, if you go down to Elkhorn Slough in Monterey Bay, that is a wonderland for these sharks and rays. And locally here in Contra Costa County, you can actually seasonally see bat rays sometimes from Point Pinole Regional Shoreline. All right, another fun summertime critter, the yellow-billed magpie, and I'll read just one paragraph from that. A tiding of iridescence, and I saw a nice photo of a California quail earlier during the photo competition. So if you like quail, don't be offended about what I'm about to say. All right, no offense to the adorably plump and snazzy-looking California quail, but the Golden State's designated state bird should be changed to the yellow-billed magpie.
It's our chapter's bird, too.
I'm speaking to the converted. The quail is. Oh, not by the end of tonight. We'll take a vote. We'll take a vote at the end of the night. We'll see. We'll see where we land. Hear me out. Okay, it should be changed to the yellow-billed magpie. This avian denizen of open oak woodlands and grassy oak savannas is endemic to California. While this magpie is the only bird species found exclusively within our state's boundaries, California quail have a range spanning 7 states and 3 countries. Not convinced, I see. All right. Yellow-billed magpies are gorgeous, with a tuxedo pattern of black and white, flashy iridescence in their wings, bright yellow beaks, and impossibly long tails. These flashy birds will hop enthusiastically along the ground to run down insects or other prey. They mostly eat bugs and acorns, but are not above making a meal of trash or roadkill. Famed local natural historian Malcolm Margolin perfectly captured the essence of magpies that pass through a Sunol campground in the morning to check for food in the garbage cans. Quote, "Their elegance is almost embarrassing. It's like having members of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra in full dress searching through your leftovers." Yeah. Magpies are clamorous and highly social, foraging in large flocks and nesting in colonies. They're members of the corvid family, relatives of crows and jays, so it's no surprise that they're brash and gregarious. A congregation of these birds is called a tiding of magpies. A tiding of magpies. There's lots of them, but that's the best one. Among their social behaviors, magpies hold a sort of funeral when one of their own is found dead, calling to attract others to the scene. Up to 40 magpies have been observed gathered around their dearly departed, chattering loudly for 10 to 15 minutes before dispersing. Communalist magpies construct their nests in proximity to each other, creating colonies of distinctively domed, loosely woven stick nests about 50 feet off the ground in groves of sycamore, cottonwood, or oak trees. Territorial disputes between 2 magpies are resolved by a comical and exaggerated parallel walk, side by side along their territory boundary. This can end with a tail-up display, thrown in for good measure, the avian equivalent of flipping your neighbor the bird. Gangs of troublemaker young magpies will invade established nesting territories in the spring to test the boundaries and defenses of breeding pairs and to see if they can take over a prime breeding location. After nesting season is over, yellow-billed magpies still want to hang out with the crowd and may form nightly roosts of 50 or more birds. Groups of magpies will also gather to scold, dive bomb, and mob a potential predator such as an owl, raptor, or bobcat.
Where would you go to see them?
Oh, thank you. I almost would have forgotten. So this is another species whose numbers have plummeted in California. I'm actually considering, my organization, Center for Biodiversity, is doing a status review and looking at whether this might be a candidate for listing under California's State Endangered Species Act. They really plummeted, I think, is between the late 1960s and 2015, they dropped about 76% in California numbers, and their range has been reduced due to loss of oak woodlands and sprawl development. They're still treated as agricultural pests in some areas and are sometimes trapped and shot by cattle ranchers. They are also killed by rat poisons since they scavenge, and they were very hard hit by the West Nile virus epidemic. From 2004 to 2006, we lost nearly half the state's magpie population in just 3 years. We don't know yet what the effect of the avian flu will be, but people are monitoring it. So the magpie is maybe the most charismatic of hundreds of bird and animal species that are dependent on or associated with our oak woodlands in California. And we've got more than 1 million acres of the state's oaks are under threat of being cut down to clear land for cattle grazing, growing grapes, or building subdivisions. And then we have problems with a lot of oak species not regenerating in California sufficiently due to fire suppression, overgrazing by cattle, and invasion by weedy annual grass grasses. So if you want to see these guys, I'm sure if you bird in Contra Costa County, you've seen them, but you can see them year-round, but they're more conspicuous during breeding season, which is from February to July, and obviously good places to see them, Del Val Regional Park, and in East Livermore, especially along Mines Road, and you can also pair wine tasting with watching tuxedo trash birds. Have a designated driver. So perhaps the important part, at least to me, of my book is the conservation message throughout it. I'm just one of many, and the organizations I work for are one of many warning about the loss of biological diversity. And the San Francisco Bay Area has been identified as one of the nation's 6 most important biodiversity hotspots. We're very wealthy in a variety of plants, animals, and ecotypes, but they're all facing numerous severe threats. And as the human population of the Bay Area continues to explode, we're at nearly 8 million people right now. Sprawl development is rapidly eliminating and fragmenting our remaining wildlands and habitat for imperiled species. So I offer up stories about our animal neighbors as kind of parables for the Anthropocene, and the Anthropocene, of course, being the current period during which human activity has completely altered the climate, the environment, and much of the Earth's landscapes. If any of you are familiar with E.O. Wilson, he's a renowned scientist and myrmecologist. That's the study of ants. He is known as the father of biodiversity, and he has been warning us for many years in his books, but warned that if we do not change course, the upcoming biological age could come to be known as the Aramezoic era, or the age of loneliness, after the 6th great extinction wave leaves the planet depauperate of biodiversity due to human activities. And yes, in this scenario, we humans are the metaphorical meteorite. In that vein, so yeah, I don't know if people have been reading the headlines, but there is a consensus among a lot of scientists and experts that we could lose up to 1 million species within our lifetimes due to the extinction crisis. So this is a pressing issue that is obviously not being addressed currently. So I highlight a trio of endemic Bay Area species that unfortunately we have lost to extinction, just to remind us what we've lost. The first is the Berkeley kangaroo rat. This was an endearing little critter that hopped around on long, powerful hind legs. It had a really long tail with a tufted tip, and it stored seeds in its cute, furry little cheek pouches. So it lived only in the Berkeley-Oakland Hills east to Mount Diablo, and the entire species is wiped out by 1940 due to poisons spread out for ground squirrels, sprawl development, and predation by feral cats. A little less cuddly, but just as ecologically essential, was the sooty crayfish on the bottom there, a small freshwater crustacean that was once common enough around the Bay Area to be harvested for Bay Area food markets in San Francisco. It was displaced by introduced non-native crayfish, and it was gone by the early 1900s. And then perhaps the most famous is the Xerces blue butterfly, upper right there, which lived only in coastal sand dunes of the Sunset District in western San Francisco, and it depended on lupins and other native host plants. It was wiped out by development, and the last individual butterfly was seen in 1942. There is a really good organization called the Xerces Society, which advocates for endangered insects and is named after this butterfly. And then I asked readers to remember some charismatic megafauna that is not extinct, but it's been extirpated from our region, so no longer occurs here. And things that used to roam the Bay Area, like the grizzly bear, whose ghost definitely still haunts the Golden State. It's on our flag. It's all over on UC Berkeley campus with the bear statues and the mascot. The last East Bay grizzly was shot in Strawberry Canyon below Grizzly Peak in the 1860s, and the last grizzly in California confirmed was shot in 1922 down in Tulare County. And the closest grizzlies now are in Idaho, but like I said, still on the state flag and memorialized everywhere. And now, almost exactly a century after its disappearance, people are insisting that grizzly bears should return to California. The California Grizzly Alliance and an increasing number of native tribes are advocating for reintroduction of grizzlies to historic remote habitats in California, such as the High Sierra. And this is a very interesting, I'm not suggesting they're going to get to the Bay Area, but we did used to have them here. Then there's gray wolves. They are not waiting for humans to act to reintroduce them. They have been migrating south from Oregon since 2015. And there was an update last week of 3 new wolf packs in California. We are now up to 10 confirmed packs in California with 78 wolves from the Oregon border all the way down to the mountains around Lake Tahoe and even into the southern Sierra. Again, not suggesting that they're going to get to the Bay Area, but they could get pretty close. Very interesting. And unfortunately, we are seeing efforts, ranchers are already trying to have them killed or removed from some areas. So we know how to live with wolves. It's done in a lot of places, and hopefully in California we're going to learn to do that as well. All right, let's talk about the California condor, the thunderbird back from the brink. And you got to show some love for the scavengers. This is nature's cleanup crew, and these are the big guys in charge. So condors nearly went extinct due to being shot by dumb humans, and more insidiously from secondary lead poisoning from scavenging on lead-tainted carcasses. And it turns out lead is just absolute kryptonite for condors. A small lead shot pellet can kill an adult condor. The entire species was down to only 22 birds in the 1980s, and they were all taken into a captive breeding program. And unknown whether they would breed in captivity and whether they would ever be reintroduced back out in the wild. Fortunately, they are being, it has been pretty successful. There are now 350 California condors in the wild and more than 200 in the captive breeding program. And this is a photo of a condor named Marie Antoinette that I took a photo of. This is my photo from Pinnacles National Park. And this shows you just how close you can get to these amazing birds. And if you look at the wing tag and get the number and the color, you can go on to Condor Spotter and find out the whole lineage of your condor, who they're related to, when they were released, where they're released, and their name. So in California, the best place to see them, go to Pinnacles and hike up to the high peaks. It's really incredible. You can see them along the Big Sur coast, down in the Sespe Condor Range, down near Santa Barbara. In the last 6 years or so, they were reintroduced to just east of San Simeon in the Central Coast, and they were recently reintroduced into Northern California. The good news, California condors have now started exploring the Diablo Range, and so the condors from Pinnacles and Big Sur linked up a long time ago and go back and forth, and those birds have started flying up to Mount Diablo. In the last 4 years, condors have made flights from down there up to and around Mount Diablo, including, I think, 13 birds this year went right over the main peak. So hopes are that they will eventually nest, or at least roost here. And yeah, you can't talk about condors without talking about lead. I've worked on conservation of condors for about 15 years, and after a long battle, we finally got the state of California in 2019 to ban the use of lead ammunition in all hunting activities. Unfortunately, given the high number of condor deaths that still happen from lead poisoning, not very well enforced or followed by a lot of hunters. And there's been quite a bit of research on where that lead's coming from. They do lead isotope analysis and prove that it comes from lead bullets and shot, not coming from paint or the soil or any kind of food. So there's the condor reintroduction program in some places did this thing where they brought a radiograph out in the field, and they told hunters, bring your deer by after you shoot it and put it on a radiograph, and we'll show you what's inside. So that this is a deer down near Big Sur that was brought in, and you can see the channel that shows where the bullet entry was, and then all those little flecks are snowflakes, a snowstorm of minute lead particles. And when you show this to hunters, what they're feeding to their family when they eat game shot with lead, it tends to have an impact. So I discuss at length in my book kind of the best tools we have for wildlife protection, conservation laws such as the Endangered Species Act, which is obviously now under Trump assault. We have nearly 50 animals in the Bay Area that are protected as threatened or endangered species, and incredibly not a single one has gone extinct while protected under the Endangered Species Act, even though some of them are very close to the brink. Don't worry, water diverters and developers are working hard to try to ruin that stat, though. So, and I also cover just the breadth and the importance and power of local conservation groups around the Bay Area and try to provide ways to plug in. So there are plenty of depressing environmental stories and permanent losses, but I want to talk about some Bay Area wildlife success stories. So there's quite a number of iconic species that have returned to the Bay Area on their own once we just stopped, killing or poisoning or persecuting them. And hard to believe today, but all of the Pacific whales were hunted almost nearly to extinction by the early 1900s. And industrial whaling removed an estimated 2 million whales, and each one that was harpooned left a hole in the ocean far bigger than the animal itself. So in the book, I talk about how pooping whales could possibly help save the world, and that's because whales are kind of oceanic ecosystem engineers. They help perpetuate the building blocks of marine life. They eat iron-rich krill, and they release that essential mineral back to the ocean when they defecate. The iron in whale poop is a fertilizer that stimulates the growth of phytoplankton. Krill eat the phytoplankton, whales, fish, and almost everything else eats krill, and the marine food web flourishes, at least until modern humans enter the picture. And then each individual whale itself is a huge carbon sink. The whales that do die and sink to the bottom of the ocean sequester a massive amount of carbon. So fortunately, if you go just off the coast here in the Bay Area, you can see 3 species of whales. We have blue whales, which are the largest animals to ever have lived on Earth, reaching up to 90 feet long and weighing up to 300,000 pounds. That's the weight of a herd of 15 to 20 elephants. So these are massive creatures. And fortunately, all of our whales are recovering. They're starting to come back. There are now an estimated 1,500 blue whales off the Pacific coast, about 2,400 humpbacks off of California and Oregon, and more than 20,000 gray whales just in the Central California population. You can very easily see whales if you get on a whale watching boat anywhere in the Bay Area. You can go out of San Francisco, you can go out of Bodega Bay, you can go to Half Moon Bay or Monterey Bay, and I recommend Monterey Bay because as soon as you don't even have to leave the dock to see whales.
Sausalito.
Or Sausalito. Oh, that's right. I do talk about some of the adventurous whales that have come into the bay. Yeah. And if you go to Monterey Bay, if you're not someone who's faint of heart, if you go to Monterey Bay in mid-May to first week of June, you might actually see orcas going after and killing a gray whale calf. So. All right, I understand you are all birders, so I guess we got to talk about bald eagles. Those of you who are birders know that we sometimes get jaded about charismatic megafauna. Now, obviously, if you're out there with binoculars, people inevitably will walk up to you and start talking to you about bald eagles while you're trying to get on that obscure little unidentifiable flycatcher that's, you're never going to see anyhow. So yeah, people get very excited about bald eagles. And bald eagles, of course, like to steal fish from osprey, and they like to drive smaller birds off of carcasses, and this technically makes them what's known as a kleptoparasite. So this is an ecological description that doesn't quite have the noble ring that national myths are made of, right? And I just learned, I didn't realize this, that bald eagle's been the symbol of the U.S. for a long time, but it's not officially designated the national bird until just a couple years ago. So yeah, I was like, how did that go by for so long? So I talk in the book about how the bald eagle might unintentionally be a kind of apt totem for America, a nation built on theft of land from Native Americans and theft of labor from African slaves. So, but they are very charismatic ambassadors, and fortunately, they are back from the brink after the ban of DDT. They were one of the birds that had the eggshell thinning and failed nesting because of the use of DDT. They spent some time being listed under the Endangered Species Act, and we also have the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act specifically to protect eagles. There are now an estimated 40 to 50 breeding pairs in the greater Bay Area, and they are regular winter visitors to Contra Costa County. People here, I'm sure, know that. So places to see them, go to reservoirs, all those fish, Los Vaqueros, San Pablo, Briones, Lafayette, and Clifton Court, Forbay are some good local spots. All right, my favorite bird. Yeah?
To use your book to find them, is that, I'm just seeing this description here, but are there other pages that show where they are?
Yeah, there's maps. There's I talk about where the best places in the Bay Area to see them, and then actually, if you go to my website, when I wrote this book and I got it to the publisher, Heyday, they're like, "You're going to have to cut this down." I had everywhere to go in the Bay Area to see everything. So if you go on my website, I actually have a lot of that info on there. Except for stuff that don't want people to overrun it. So there's a few things that stay private. So. All right, I want to talk about one of my favorite birds, peregrine falcons, which I call screaming death parrots. So these were also, peregrines were also DDT victims, and by the early 1970s, we only had 2 nesting pairs remaining in the entire state. There was a massive recovery effort. We were back up to about 50 pairs in the greater Bay Area just a few years ago, but unfortunately avian flu now seems to be taking peregrine pairs out, and even including some famous pairs. The Cal Falcons at UC Berkeley, Campanile did not show up this spring, and known peregrine pairs at Point Reyes have also disappeared. So we might be in a little bit of a peregrine crisis in the Bay Area. Well, actually, even wider. So peregrines have been called, other people have called them feathered fighter jets due to their 200-mile-per-hour stoop, which makes them the fastest animal on the planet. And the effective way they dispatch small prey, mostly small to medium-sized birds. That bottom photo is a photo I took of a death parrot right at the moment it did the death bite on the nape of a western gull, which I watched it attack and overpower. And of course, a western gull is a bird much larger and heavier than a peregrine. So they are quite efficient at taking out bird prey. The black hood definitely adds to their executioner vibe, so yeah, I call them the screaming death parrot because there was genetic research published in 2014 that suggests that falcons are actually more closely related to parrots than they are to hawks. Their similarities are due to convergent evolution. They actually evolved separately after the breakup of the Gondwana supercontinent. More than 100 million years ago, they diverged. So falcons evolved in South America, hawks evolved in Africa, and because they have similar hunting and feeding styles, they look and seem the same. But from an evolutionary perspective, a falcon can be viewed as more of a murderous parrot than a hawk. So modern peregrines have evolved to use our cities and bridges as urban cliffs. Cliffs, of course, are a habitat in short supply and high demand and competition in nature. So our bridges, cities, structures. So you can find famous nesting pairs. I mentioned the Campanile, where they started breeding in 2017. On San Jose City Hall, there's a famous breeding pair. And they were reintroduced to Mount Diablo in 1980. They nest annually in the state park among the Castle Rock sandstone formations overlooking Pine Creek, and the access is through Diablo Foothills Regional Park. And they do close that rock to climbing and people being on it during nesting season. That top middle photo, in case you're wondering what's going on there, just when you get home, Google copulation hats or hump helmets, and you will learn about how bird genitalia headgear dramatically helped with captive peregrine breeding and reintroduction. So, a very fun story. Falconers are weird. I need to be pointing at that. There we go. All right. Coyotes. So I call my coyote chapter Return of the Trickster. The coyote has perhaps been the most persecuted large mammal in North America. But this is a species that is very resilient, and for the last 500 years they have continuously expanded their range throughout North America, even amidst settler societies that were hell-bent on eradicating them. And their latest magic trick is turning our cities into habitat. So we now have several dozen coyotes living throughout urban San Francisco. Pretty much every park in San Francisco has coyotes. And it's estimated that an astounding 5,000 coyotes live in the Los Angeles basin, in and among us. There was a really interesting study just published in the last year that they went through coyote scat in San Francisco and teased all out and analyzed what they're eating because people were freaking out. I guess few people's pets were chomped. And it turns out there's only 1 or 2 coyotes that specialize on pets. Most of them are eating human garbage, Big Macs and stuff like that. And they're eating a lot of rodents. They're eating rats, they're eating mice. So yeah, it's just a couple that specialize on pets. What's that? Yeah.
They use the creeks around here to get around. I always found that fascinating, because I live on Grayson Creek, and I've seen them 3 times.
Yeah.
And that keeps them below the radar.
Seen them on Diablo,
Yeah. So the absolute easiest place to see them is pretty much all of Marin County. If you go out to Point Reyes National Seashore, you're going to see coyotes. Anywhere in the Marin Headlands and the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Locally, Sunol Regional Wilderness, a great spot. Obviously, Mount Diablo State Park, and then Tilden and Briones. So. Did I do it again?
I don't know. Let's see.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, river otters, and I jokingly refer to them as aquatic death weasels, and this is due to there's family groups in West Marin that basically form mucilid strike teams, and they work together to ambush, drown, and eat brown pelicans. And it was birders who discovered this. You know, it's long been known that that river otters will eat, you know, coots, grebes, small ducks, stuff like that. But a brown pelican is a very large bird. So that bottom photo is one I took from Abbott's Lagoon in Point Reyes, and I watched this family of otters. They sent a couple decoy otters swimming at a non-threatening distance, very obviously on the surface, while the others dove, came up below the pelican and dragged it down and drowned / asphyxiated it, towed it to shore and ate it. And then I watched them eat it, and then I walked along the shore of the lagoon and noticed every 50 yards was another pelican carcass. So luckily, pelicans have recovered. They were also a DDT victim. They were once on the endangered species list. They've recovered enough that a few can probably be sacrificed for river otter food. So despite the pelican mayhem, they're pretty good ambassadors for restoring local watersheds. They have reintroduced themselves to our waterways, and they're expanding all around the Bay Area. The River Otter Ecology Project has a lot of good info on where to find them. And they are native species, yep. And they're a good indicator of water quality and health of the watershed, because they can live all the way from the headwaters down to near the mouths, near the coast. So good places to see them. If you want to watch them kill pelicans, go to Rodeo Lagoon out in the Marin Headlands, or go out to Point Reyes. Locally, you can see them at Lake Merritt, and then in Lower Alameda Creek, they've showed up in Fremont. Since we built the new fish ladders, they immediately figured out what the fish ladders are for, so you can see them at the fish ladders there and Quarry Lakes. And then, oh yeah. Obviously the Delta and all along Carquinez Strait, any of the wetlands, and yeah, you guys know the places around here. Oh, right here it says Heather Farm Park. So. I don't need to tell you guys about river otters. So that upper right is that same family of pelican murderers out at Abbott's Lagoon, and I watch them. Just, you know how they are. They like to frolic and dive, and then when they run on the land, someone described them as a slinky in a fur coat when they run on the land. And these guys just cavorted their way through the lagoon to their favorite little sand dune that they like to slide down, and then they just absolutely whirled themselves into otter churros. So they're very cute. All right, another species bringing itself back, the black bear. I call them furry foodies because most of the black bears we have had until very recently are in the North Bay, kind of in wine country, and gourmet North Coast localvore black bears eating artisanal berries and honey and So we're kind of witnessing a very slow motion ecological release of black bears in California. An ecological release being a population increase when a species is freed from any kind of limiting factor. And in this case, the limiting factor was grizzlies. And black bears are now, just now, belatedly moving down from the mountains to expand their territories into lowland areas 100 years after the more aggressive grizzlies are gone. So they're kind of just now poking their head out like, you guys, I think it's finally safe. So they are increasing very quickly in the North Bay. They are breeding in northern Sonoma and Napa counties. There was a study in just 1 year in 2020 that identified 33 individual bears in Sonoma and Marin counties. And just in the last few weeks, there's been multiple sightings of different black bears in Jenner at the mouth of the Russian River. And of course, there's kind of the adventurous ones that have come into San Anselmo and other places. They are likely to continue moving into the Bay Area and the next places, throughout the Coast Range. But experts think they will move into the Diablo Range eventually. So we could have black bears on and around Mount Diablo and definitely into the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we are going to need to relearn how to live with black bears and manage our trash and our pets, probably. All right, tule elk, kind of a signature species for California, endemic, of course, to this state. It's our smallest elk species, the smallest of the three. We have Roosevelt elk in Northern California. There were more than estimated 500,000 tule elk in California, in the Central Valley and in the Coast Ranges before European contact. They were decimated by hunting and by introduction of cattle, displaced by cattle. And after the gold rush, it was thought they were extinct, gone forever. Luckily, there was one isolated remnant herd down in the San Joaquin Valley, and a rancher sheltered them on his ranch. And from a herd of fewer than 30 animals, of which only 3 were breeding, they were eventually reintroduced around the entire state through most of their historic range. So originally 500,000. As of 2020, there were 5,700 tule elk in California throughout 22 herds. And more than 1,000 of those in the Bay Area. So the largest Bay Area population is at Point Reyes National Seashore, about 300 free-roaming elk at latest count, and more than 300 elk in the Tomales Point herd on the northern part of the park, which was, until recently, was penned in by a huge elk fence. And I'm probably gonna have to rewrite my chapter on tule elk because I had kind of excoriated the National Park Service for prioritizing private cattle ranching and proposing to shoot tule elk in our national park so that private ranchers' cows could have more public grass. So just this January, after 10 years of battling and litigation and conflict, we signed an agreement with the Park Service, conservation groups, and the ranchers that actually would have all of the commercial beef grazing except for 2 operators leave, and all of the dairy operations at Point Reyes leave. So it would retire most of those private commercial ranches and convert those leases to restoration leases, allow elk to roam free throughout and expand throughout the park. And then the Park Service also tore down a big section of the Tomales Point fence and allowed those elk to roam free.
Are they actually roaming though?
They are, yeah. Elk moved immediately south of that fence. There's a herd of about 30 to 40 that has established itself. There's 3 to 4 herds north of the fence. Those elk suffered cyclical die-offs because of the fence. Lack of water and forage, and those elk, half the elk herd would die during drought years, while the free-roaming elk that weren't fenced in were actually still increasing at the same time. So it was absolutely the fence that was killing them because they couldn't get to the resources they needed. And they were only fenced in originally when they were reintroduced in 1978 to appease the ranchers who get the leases on the public land. So the settlement offers some hope for building up a very large elk herds on that peninsula. That could be pretty important for species that hit a genetic bottleneck and can use that kind of genetic diversity. We are now having to try to defend that settlement from Trump and from specifically from RFK Jr., unfortunately, and from rancher lawsuits. So I will say, if you care about point-raised elk and if you care about public lands, please boycott Nyman products and please boycott Strauss Dairy. Those are the folks that are leading the charge to sabotage the management plan and try to reprivatize our public parklands there. So. Oh, Nyman Ranch, they bill themselves as sustainable, local sustainable beef. They are advocating for shooting the elk. And then Strauss Dairy products, Strauss yogurt, et cetera. Strauss is actually leading a deliberate disinformation campaign about the settlement. And the ranchers themselves have already come out and said, we want this settlement, we're ready to leave. So.
Where are the Roosevelt at? No, they're farther up.
Further north, if you go up into Humboldt, they're okay. I'll chat if anyone has questions about point raised specifically, because I've worked on that for about 20 years, or about elk. Come find me afterwards, and I can talk elk all day. Other elk herds, a little closer of interest to you folks, are an Alameda San Joaquin herd of about 100 elk. You can see those if you go out to if you're on the way to Snow Regional Wilderness. If you go to McGuire Peaks, you can look down onto San Antonio Reservoir, which is their home range. And then there's the Santa Clara Mount Hamilton herd. And a lot of you know there used to be a herd in Concord at the Naval Weapons Station that was removed and relocated when that was sold off and developed. All right. Oh, did I do it again? All right, so I want to talk a little bit, am I okay? I got about another 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about some critters we have here that really need some more help from us and that we need to kind of proactively reintroduce. And this is salmon, beavers, sea otters, and burrowing owls. So I'm going to go through those. And we have 3 species of spawning salmon in the Bay Area that you can actually go witness during their spawning migrations. We have fall run Chinook salmon, which are spawning in November and December. We have coho salmon, which are coastal, so Marin County and San Mateo County spawn in December through early January. And then we have steelhead trout, which spawn winter through the spring as late as April and May. And unfortunately, due to dam building, logging of old-growth forests, the excessive freshwater diversions that we subject our rivers to fuel agribusiness and sprawl development, and then, of course, climate change-induced extended drought conditions, pretty much every West Coast salmon population is depleted and either listed as endangered, threatened, or probably should be. And I really like salmon. I've worked on salmon restoration in the Bay Area for almost 30 years, and I like salmon because they just have such a dramatic life cycle and very perilous life cycle. And it's probably one of the most arduous migrations in the animal kingdom. They have to survive in the ocean and then dodge all kinds of predators, sharks, sea lions, human fishing fleets, find their way back to their home stream, or at least near their home stream, struggle upstream, find suitable spawning substrate, good gravels, fight with each other if you're a male, fight to be able to spawn, and then they die. So pretty dramatic and a very visceral expression. If you've ever watched salmon move upstream, just an expression of the will of life to continue. So you can visit streams in the Bay Area to witness this. Probably the most famous one is Lagunitas Creek in Marin, in West Marin, to see coho. The Russian River, particularly if you go to, there's a diversion dam that Sonoma Water operates in Mirabel Park, and that actually has a viewing platform at it. And then I've been working on Alameda Creek for the last 28 years, and we recently have had several fish ladders built in the lower creek, and you can go to Fremont to the new fish ladder. And then there's barely remnant coho hanging on the San Mateo coast. You can go to Pescadero Creek. If you go to Memorial Park, you can actually see them spawning in Memorial Park. So then locally we have hatchery salmon that are returning to Central Valley rivers that sometimes get a little lost, and they detour out of Carquinez Strait and go into urban flood control channels such as Walnut Creek. So I don't know if folks have seen in the fall, there's a 1.5 mile stretch along the Iron Horse Trail, basically from Concord Avenue to there's a concrete drop structure upstream of Willow Pass Road, which I understand has gotten some modifications to actually allow salmon to go past it. And I hear, I don't know if people have seen it, but all the way up to Civic Park in downtown Walnut Creek, you can apparently see Chinook now. And you can learn more about that from the Walnut Creek Watershed Council. And then salmon have, just because they're so inspiring, they've inspired all kinds of restoration efforts around the Bay Area. Basically every creek in the entire Bay Area has a Friends of or advocate group at this point. One of the most important is Spawn out in West Marin, which works to protect and restore Lagunitas Creek. The National Park Service has started hatchery rearing coho salmon to put back into Redwood Creeks and restoring the estuary there. If you've ever been out to Muir Beach, trying to revive the salmon runs that used to go into Muir Woods. Russian River, there's a lot of success going on the Russian River. That's the lower right is the diversion dam where you can go to an underwater viewing gallery and see.
That's Russian River?
Yeah, that's the Russian River, lower right. You can see Chinook, steelhead, and lamprey in there at that viewing structure. And a number of groups have been restoring tributaries of the Russian for coho salmon. Alameda Creek Alliance, we've been championing restoration of steelhead to the bay's largest tributary, and we've had a dozen fish passage projects, 5 fish ladders built, and a bunch of mostly derelict dams taken out. Those 2 photos on the left are the new fish ladder at the Bart Weir, where Bart crosses the Alameda Creek in Fremont, and that's the lower left is an aerial view of the new fish ladder, and the upper left is what it looks like inside the fish ladder. In the last 2 winters, since those lower creek fish ladders became operable, we've had Chinook salmon, steelhead, and Pacific lamprey all start to use them. And then in the South Bay, there's the South Bay Clean Creeks Coalition, which actually promotes salmon spawning right in urban San Jose. You can go to parks in downtown San Jose and see Chinook salmon spawning there. And then there's a group on the peninsula called Beyond Searsville Dam, which is targeting, Stanford has a deadbeat dam, 65-foot high Searsville Dam, which is completely silted in, serves no useful function, and blocks most of the historic steelhead habitat upstream of Palo Alto in San Francisco Creek. So, and then in the Bay Area, we take a lot of inspiration from the Klamath Dam removal, which just happened, the largest dam removal in U.S. history. 4 dams removed. They all came out by last fall, opened up 420 miles of former spawning habitat, and salmon immediately moved upstream and started using those upstream areas. Not just that, it also kind of revitalized the tribes on the Klamath. They are rebuilding a salmon culture and economy, and along the way, they actually built a river restoration economy. They're doing just an amazing restoration effort where those former dams are, and really just kind of catalyzed the dam removal movement. So the next target is the Eel River in Northern California. There's 2 dams owned by PG&E that are going to come out. Great opportunity for restoration. And then locally in the Bay Area, like I said, our sights are really set on Stanford's Searsville Dam. We are going to have to stop Trump's insane water policies, as well as, unfortunately, Gavin Newsom's proposed additional water diversions. They want to put 2 more big straws into the Sacramento River in the Delta in the form of the Delta Tunnel and the Sites Reservoir, and those will pretty much, the water diversions those would enable would pretty much destroy all of our Central Valley salmon runs, as well as the fish that get all the vitriol, because they're worthless minnows, but all the other fish depend on. So the smelt, sturgeon, everything else we've got. So a lot of work, but also a lot of successes locally in the Bay Area. All right, beavers. You guys know about beavers. So why do we call beavers magical watershed restoration gnomes? Exactly. So their stick works serve up a whole smorgasbord of benefits. They not only raise the water table, they kind of, when they build those dams, they act as a sponge for capturing and storing water. And unlike, say, the Army Corps of Engineers that builds concrete dams, beaver dams control water in really beneficial ways. So they slow down stream flows, they reduce flood intensity, they improve fish habitat by increasing the base flow so the streams don't dry up as quickly during summer. They stabilize eroding stream banks, they prevent erosion, they trap silt, they filter pollutants, and they actually form fire control breaks. So this is going to be a really important thing to get beavers back in the arid West, given our new fire regimes. And they may be a key to restoring watersheds that have been damaged by logging, overgrazing, and development. And they work for free. So, beavers, of course, were hunted to the brink of extinction. They have that nice fur basically all our beavers were turned into fur hats at one point. But they're slowly reintroducing themselves back into our waterways. And if you don't know the story of Wortha Dam, the Martinez beavers that return, it's in my book, or the Martinez Beaver Festival is happening at the end of this month.
Tabling, we'll be there.
Excellent. I'll be tabling too, so I will see you there. And then I maintain that we need to be parachuting beavers into every watershed in the state. And this is not a joke. This flyer is actually from California Department of Fish and Game in the 1950s. They wanted to reintroduce beavers west of Tahoe in the El Dorado National Forest, and they put beaver pairs in these special cages and parachuted them, and then they opened on impact. So I think we need to be doing that everywhere. And we just started a conversation on Alameda Creek with land and water management agencies, looking into whether we can reintroduce beavers there, and that quickly expanded to cover all of the East Bay and the South Bay. So multiple agencies, organizations, and experts are now having that conversation about whether we can bring beavers back to some of our watersheds. Obviously, potential for conflicts, but you guys know anywhere along Carquinez Strait, biggest populations are in the Delta, Kirker Creek watershed, and then what's the Cortiva Wetlands Preserve supposedly has good beaver population. Then the beavers in Fairfield and Solano. Has anyone seen the Fairfield Beavers website? They have very visible beaver lodges along a trail on a flood control channel. Easy to see. There we go. All right, they're cute. They're also adorable psychopaths. So my editor told me I had to tone this chapter down in my book, unfortunately. I got a little gleeful about talking about the tendency for some young male otters for violent mating and documented incidents of necrophilia and molesting baby seals. So. Like the males of some other species, there can be some problematic behavior sometimes with young male sea otters. But before we consider ourselves morally superior, let's remember our species' history with the sea otter. They have that luxurious fur. They were hunted and slaughtered for fur to the point that the southern sea otter was thought to be extinct by the early 1900s. Luckily, there was a tiny population that survived off the Big Sur coast, fewer than 50 otters, and they have very slowly been recovering since they were protected under the Endangered Species Act in 1977. And there's now about 3,000 sea otters along our coast. The Center for Biological Diversity, in addition to getting the Endangered Species Act protections for sea otters, did a campaign and a petition and a series of lawsuits that got the Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service to agree to look into restoring them to all of their former habitats along the California coast. So now are going to be looking at whether they can re-inhabit their range north of the Bay Area all the way up to the Oregon coast. And sea otters are also a keystone species and very important for restoring those eelgrass meadows that the leopard sharks and the bat rays depend on, and also kelp forests offshore. They munch on critters that would otherwise the whole ecosystem's kind of out of balance, but we've got things that munch on and decimate both eelgrass and kelp forests, and returning otters would actually help put those in check a little bit. Hard to see in the Bay Area. You really got to go kind of south off the San Mateo coast. If you go down to about Año Nuevo, a little further south, if you go to Monterey County to Elkhorn Slough, you can kayak among them. They might even board your kayak. And then Point Lobos State Natural Reserve in Monterey County. All right, burrowing owl. This is a species I've been working on conservation for the last 22 years in California. And these are kind of the grassland sentinels, and they are in very steep decline in the Bay Area and throughout California as their habitat is paved over by development. And they're a reminder that, so this is our only underground dwelling owl in North America, and they're a reminder that open space doesn't mean empty space. Sometimes you see them in very weedy lots and just kind of trashed habitats, but if it's got everything they need, if it's got the burrows and the food, they can thrive. So as late as the 1970s, there were an estimated 1,000 pairs of breeding burrowing owls just in the South Bay alone. Now, around the San Francisco Bay margin, we have only 25 breeding pairs left, and those are all in Santa Clara County, and they're all still there only because of emergency intervention, a captive breeding program, and yeah, just kind of triage. The greater San Francisco Bay Area, there's about 500 pairs, obviously mostly in the breeding pairs, eastern Alameda and Contra Costa County, Altamont Pass, Solano County, and Santa Clara counties. Those are all rapidly declining populations. Unfortunately, up to about 100 burrowing owls still get whacked each year at Altamont Pass by the wind turbines, despite some efforts to make those areas safer. And then, these critters absolutely depend on ground squirrels to excavate their homes. They don't.
What did you say they were being hit by?
The wind turbines at Altamont Pass, and I worked on that for many years too. If anyone wants to talk about that, that's
We were involved
kind
in the
of
litigation.
okay. You were So, and then unfortunately, in a lot of rural areas, there's poisoning and persecution of ground squirrels, which they depend on to excavate their homes. So we first petitioned to try to get state endangered species protections for burrowing owls in 2003, and I was the lead author on that listing petition. Unfortunately, the state caved to pressure from developers and agricultural interests and refused to protect the owls. The last 2 decades, we've just seen numbers plummet. So we petitioned, especially since 2018, just dramatic loss of breeding numbers. So we petitioned again last year in 2024, and we asked for the state to look at protecting 5 imperiled populations as endangered or threatened, and the Bay Area would definitely be endangered. In October, the State Fish and Game Commission made them what's called a candidate species for listing, so they're doing a whole status review, and they have the official protections of as if they were a threatened species right now. I think ultimately we will get Bay Area owls protected under the state law. Locally, if you want to see these guys, we get a big wintering influx of owls that breed in northern areas, eastern Oregon, Washington, Idaho, BC, come and winter here in California, but they all leave by spring and go back to their breeding areas. If you want to see, but we do have local breeding populations, and those are the ones that are really declining. You've got the Antioch Burrowing Owl Preserve near you. That's basically was set up, it's pretty small, about 24 acres, but was set up as compensation for development projects that were permitted that evicted large numbers of breeding owls. And that's adjacent to the water park there, the Pruitt Family Water Park. And then Los Vaqueros Watershed is a good place to find them around the Byron Airport, and Clifton Court Forebay, especially along the entrance road to Clifton Court. And I hear there's a few breeding, not large numbers, at Vasco Caves Regional Preserve. So those are kind of the... All right, I will end on an invertebrate because I really want people to love the little critters too. And if you stop and look, sometimes they're pretty charismatic. So I want to talk about nudibranchs and hardcore tide pooling. All right. Step with me off the edge of our continent into a watery wonderland just off the coast, where we'll explore a mysterious liminal world of tiny and bizarre sea creatures. During extreme low tides, the ocean retreats enough to expose the otherwise hidden aquatic universe of Bay Area coastal tide pools. Watch your step as we descend through 3 distinct tidal zones to visit with life forms adapted to a harsh environment of crashing waves and fluctuating water levels. First, we'll pass through the rocks of the splash zone, careful not to step on limpets, barnacles, or turban snails. Once we reach the intertidal zone, which the salty tide covers and uncovers twice daily, the party really starts. Behind forests of mussels blanketing rocky reefs, we'll find neon green sea anemones, scuttling hermit crabs, purple and orange sea stars, leathery-looking chitons, and tiny darting silver fish doing the hustle back and forth as if their tidal pool were the Studio 54 dance floor. Low tide affords us a glimpse below into the eternally submerged subtidal zone, where larger fish cruise by, and we may spot spiny sea urchins, big crabs, or possibly a lobster or octopus. But what we've really soaked our sneakers for are the flamboyant nudibranchs. Some louts call them sea slugs, but that doesn't do them justice. Marine biologist and nudie researcher Victoria Kentner pronounced nudibranchs the gems of the tide pool. Nudibranchs are shellless marine mollusks with an aesthetic that could be described as Victorian steampunk electric boogie. Most of these fantastical beasts are only 2 inches long, and the smallest a mere 1/4 inch. They're often brightly colored, and some have alien-looking paired horns. The backs of others are festooned with feathery gills, sculptured protuberances, or otherworldly appendages. If these creatures are slugs, they're disco slugs dressed for a P-Funk concert. There are 3,000 known species of nudibranchs in the world's oceans, and luckily for us, about 100 of them occur in California's intertidal zone. They have whimsical names such as sea lemon, salt and pepper doris, hunchback doris, shaggy mouse, hammerhead dodo, chocolate aeoliad, and opalescent nudibranch, each one impossibly beautiful and more fantastical than the last. The Spanish shawl is an electric purple slug with a flaming red pelt of spikes. A Hopkins rose could be mistaken for a bubblegum pink bathroom scrubby. And a Goddard's aeoliad looks as if the lead singer's hair from an 80s metal band became sentient and slipped off into the sea. So explore your local tide pools. You got amazing tide pooling on the coast. And I also encourage you to check out Bowie Branchia, a website that explores the question, was David Bowie's fashion inspired by the nudibranchs, or were the nudibranchs inspired by Bowie? It's still an open question. So.